Thank you very much. Thanks very much, Sana. There was that pause you were talking about. Good morning, everybody. My name is Mark Robson, and I run a company called 6 Miles High. I've been designing presentations for about 20 years. Previously, I used to work for a company for Apple. And then since then, I've worked with Google, Nike, Visa, eBay, but also with lots of startups and companies of every size, really, working on their presentations for important launches, important announcements, for group meetings, for everything you could think of in the world of presentations. And over that time, I've kind of come up with this formula of 6 steps to get you to a powerful presentation. And I'd like to share that with you today. Please feel free to ask questions at any time. Um, it might be better if we can save them to the end and then we can address them all together. But if you do have something urgent that you want to tell me about, just drop it in the chat and I can probably respond to it. I'm conscious that we are in a forum about innovation, and presentations aren't necessarily about that. But one of the things I can talk about today is the increasing use of AI in presentations. Just a bit of broad brush blanket statement. I've been to a presentation conference earlier in the year, and the sort of general consensus was that AI presentation building tools aren't quite there yet. If you're building a really important presentation, you can use lots of AI to generate images and work on your copy and things like that, but you're probably still best using one of the main things, like one of the main tools like Google Slides or PowerPoint or Keynote if you've got a Mac. And just use the AI to create elements that live within that format. But that's not to say that these tools aren't coming along. So there's a program called Gamma, which is probably the closest. And then there's various other things. And if you want to know about those, I can contact you later and send you what some of the new ones are. But like I say, firm recommendation is still to use things like PowerPoint, Google Slides, Keynote, and even Canva is a great tool if you're a smaller organization. Okay. So I'm conscious some of these effects might not work over Zoom. So apologies if you just get a still frame. I have got video backgrounds in most of my slides, so you might not always see them, but you'll get the same message and you'll get the same content. So like I say, 6 steps to powerful presentations. This is based on our experience of working with Apple corporate teams, with corporate teams from all over and from people starting up their own companies and just about everybody I've worked with. My company is called 6 Miles High. That's another story for another time. But basically, at some point, I was cabin crew in my life and I was working from a plane. So that's kind of where it comes from. All right. So before I dig into these steps, a great format for you all to remember when you're building a presentation is, first of all, tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them, and then tell them what you've told them. People are not as invested in your content as you are, and people will check out and they'll check their phone and they'll wander off. So by reiterating the message 3 times, you're hopefully going to get it across at least once. They'll at least remember part of it. So with that in mind, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. So these are our 6 steps. The first one is put it all down. This is often the step that people get stuck at. And we'll dig into that in a little bit. We'll dig into all these steps with more detail. But the first thing is to get everything down out of your head and not even start building slides yet. Once you've done that, then you can start working on your slides. Then you can polish your content by thinking about videos, GIFs, images, graphs, things like that. Then it's important to practice your presentation. I think often people don't get to practice their presentations. Then prepare your environment. So whether you're presenting online or in person, it's really important to consider how your presentation is going to go across. Check all your tech. And then we're going to talk about some tips about when you're actually presenting itself. A bit of a disclaimer. I understand that when we're building presentations, there's often a lack of time. They're rushed. You've got to get them out. You've got to meet a deadline. You've got to present them tomorrow. You've got to show them to the boss. So what I'm showing you here is a kind of ideal world scenario. If you've got a really important presentation, perhaps one that you're going to repeat and present to multiple different people, perhaps you're asking for funding, this is the dream scenario that you go through all these steps and get everything done. But if you don't have the time, if you are rushed, if you just take some of the information from today, hopefully that's going to help you get a better presentation. So again, put it all down. That's this step of getting everything out of your head. Like I say, people don't care usually as much about your presentation as you do. So there's a temptation for people to just share everything that's in their head. But you've got to think about how the other person is going to be receiving it. You shouldn't just jump straight into your slides. That should be later on once you've figured out your story. Polishing your content is an important step, but again, it comes later, halfway through the process. Don't forget to practice. Make sure your environment is ready, and then we'll get to presenting. So let's look at that first one. So hopefully you can see a video in the background of somebody scribbling away. And this is really important. Ideally, she wouldn't even have the laptop open. Not everybody uses pen and paper, I understand that. So you could use like an AI tool to get down your thoughts, or you could write in Word. You could dictate to your Google Assistant, whatever it is. But it's really, really important to get everything out of your head. What often happens is people get everything out of their head, they dump it straight into the presentation, and then they take that presentation and present it. And what comes across is just slides and slides full of dense information that makes sense to you, but don't make sense to anybody else whatsoever. So that first step is to get everything out of your head. Don't even think about slides and just look at what you've got. When you've got it all down on paper, you can kind of draw arrows about, oh, well, maybe that bit lives well with that bit. And maybe that bit is duplicated, or I'm saying the same thing twice in different words. Maybe that bit's not necessary at all. Maybe we can cut that bit out. So go through and get everything down, but then start cutting it back. Think about how the audience are going to receive it. What's the best way of getting what's in your head over to the audience? Be absolutely ruthless. Just cut out stuff left, right, and center until you've got a kind of structure that you're really happy with and that you think tells the story in a best way possible. While you're at it, think about a story. You know, there's various tools online you can find about how to tell a really good story, and there's various models of, you know, stories about what's the problem and then the solution we found and where we find ourselves today. There's loads of different models. But think about putting all your content into that story, because again, that helps you get that message over to your audience. Once you've done all of this, then this is the first point you can think about putting it into slides. So now we can open up our laptop, we can fire up Google Slides or PowerPoint or whatever your chosen program is, and start pulling together the structure of the slides. But don't start making it look pretty yet. We're way off that just yet. What a great thing to do at this point is get all that content that you've got out of your head and divide it over the slides, but just in words. So it's kind of, you know, you might have a title and a little description of what that slide's going to be. So you pop it all down and you can now start to look at the structure and the content. You've had a go at putting a story together, but once it's in slides, just sort of plain slides with words on, you can really see from a top level how everything looks together. So get the flow of your story right. Zooming out is a really good technique. So in PowerPoint, you can go to this view called Slide Sorter. In Keynote, it's called Light Table. I think it's called Slide Sorter in Google Slides as well. And basically, it's looking at all your slides on one view. So you might have 10, you might have 16, you might have 52. But from that view, you can see them all and start to sort of see how the presentation is going to flow. And from there, you can easily reorder stuff. So again, we're scrutinizing our story, we're looking at our content, and maybe that whole section could move before that other section. And maybe that section, again, it's kind of duplicating what we've said before. So let's get ruthless again. Let's chop stuff out. Let's get rid of stuff. You know, when I worked at Apple, there was a big thing written on the wall of the design team. I wasn't lucky enough to go there, but I heard this. And it's simplify, crossed out, simplify, crossed out, simplify. And an Apple slide deck would have maybe 5 words on it. So this is your time, again, to try and crop that down. But now you're in your deck, so you're getting closer, but start chopping stuff out. And also, you might want to think here about images and photos. We'll add them later, but on a slide, you might just write, you know, image of a whatever, video of this, chart of this. So you're sort of pulling the skeleton together of your deck without actually going near your final content. Yeah, so that's your kind of watchword. Can you cut it back even more? I'm actually breaking my own rule here by having loads of words on a slide. When I presented this before, it just says pull your slides together. But I wanted to dig down into the content a little bit more to talk about where we're at this section. Okay, so we've got everything out of our head. We've started to put it into a deck. You can now move it around. Use that zoom out view. It's really helpful. And also in PowerPoint and in Keynote, and I think in Canva too, you can't do this in Google Slides, you can actually build sections and chapters. It's a really good way of looking at your content bit by bit, rather than being overwhelmed by like 30 slides. Break it down into 4 chapters. And then you can go through each little chapter and go, okay, yeah, I'm happy with that now. Move on to the next one. Happy with that one, move on to the next one. So that's a really good tip. And again, that's a really good way of moving things around. So sort of like that section could move up there and what have you. All right, now we're into making the fun stuff. Now, only at this stage, should you start polishing your content. So if it is a text slide, and there's nothing wrong with a text slide, cut it down as much as you can. At 6 Miles High, if we're working on a full sort of higher end project, we could bring in a copywriter at this point. And they could really look at your copy and boil it down to its purest essence. I have this boring random story, which I'll share with you, which sort of always sticks in my mind. I went to a restaurant once in Germany, and the chef, it was one of those where you do one of those lovely tasting menus, and the chef comes out and talks to you about what his thoughts were and all of that sort of business. And we'd had this really lovely mushroom soup, and we were just kind of like, oh, that was really lovely. It was a mushroom soup. But he told us that he had been boiling the mushrooms down for kind of 48 hours to get down to the purest essence of mushroom, which is why it tasted so good. And I always think this is what you need to do with your slides. So look at it again and again, each individual slide. If it's a paragraph, do you really need the paragraph? Would a 5-line sentence do the job? Really cut it down. Would a video be better? Would a little video just encapsulate that whole paragraph that you're trying to talk about? If you've got a table full of numbers, do you need the table? I often have these examples from Apple where you maybe have a whole table of, 6 months worth of data, but what's the thing you're trying to call out? Is it just that there was a blip 2 years ago and that there's a spike in sales? If so, just put that big number on the slide. People will get it so much quicker rather than a table full of stuff. Just focus on what's the one thing you want to tell them. The other thing you want to think as well is, what is everything on the slide doing? Does everything have a job? If it hasn't got a job, get shut of it. Really, really make it as simple for your audience to digest as possible. So we're going to try and make it visually appealing. That's not to say you need to pepper your slides with images for no reason. Like I say, if it's just text content, there's nothing wrong with text content. In fact, a small sentence can get your idea across easier sometimes than something abstract that people won't get. With everything, always think about your audience. How are they going to digest this? Don't think about you and your ideas. Think about how they're going to understand it in the most simple way possible. And then the final thing with polishing is, if possible, use a template. A lot of presentations I see and get sent to make look better are just blank slides with some stuff on. And that's fine, but then when you're looking at a whole deck, there's no kind of consistency. And so let's say you had a logo on every slide, but if you just sort of freestyled the slides, the logo could be in a different place. And for your audience, that's distracting because they're going to notice that. It's kind of going to stick in the corner of their eye and it's going to draw their attention away from the main content that you're trying to share with them. So keep it consistent, keep the colors consistent. They should feel like what they're looking at is like a home for them. They don't want distracting. They don't want to be put off by anything. Everything should feel like it's all one part of something, and so that the main message that they're seeing every time is all they're focusing on, and the rest of the stuff just sort of fades to the background. Yeah, it's great to have your logo. You maybe don't need it on every slide. It's good if you're going to be sharing it because then they can see, if they just look at one slide, they can see where that's come from. But you don't necessarily need it on every slide in a presentation because you'll tell them at the beginning and you'll tell them at the end. So maybe get rid of those because they could be distracting. Don't use lots and lots and lots of different colors because that could kind of send you all over the place. Stick to a color palette. It's a bit like branding or a website. You want to stay within a certain look and feel so that people feel at home and they're not distracted. Okay, so this is kind of the halfway step. Only at this point should we be really happy with our deck. We've got everything out of our head. We've cut it down. We've been really ruthless. We've started to put it into our deck. We've moved the story around. We've scrutinized the story again and again and again. Ad infinitum. We're going a bit crazy. We're about sick of looking at our bloody slides. Happens all the time, but that's good. That's a good sign. Because if you've just chucked it down, then you haven't really scrutinized it. We've used a template to keep everything looking sharp and sort of matching our brand. We've thought about different kinds of media to keep it really interesting. And to really just get the ideas across in the most simple way possible. That's the name of the game, is to make your audience get your message quicker. Again, it's not a very nice thing to say, but the people watching your stuff don't care about it as much as you. So you've got to make it as easy as possible for them to get it. All right. So next up, practice. Now, there's not always time to practice. I get it. There's not even always time to go through your slides. But if this is a kind of presentation that could change your life, that could win you funding, that's going to transform your business, it's really important that you practice your presentation. And there are a few reasons for this. So one of the first ones is, by getting to practice, you get to know your content inside and out. And so you don't have to keep looking over your shoulder at the slides. Or while you're on Zoom, getting distracted by going, what was I saying again? If you practice it, you can keep your eye contact with the audience at all times. And that's super important because it essentially, and this is weird coming from a presentation designer because it's my job, but the slides are not as important as you are. I always think the slides are just like your backing singers, and you're the Michael Bublé. That's probably a bad reference, but you're the Dua Lipa or the Freddie Mercury. They're just, the slides they're helping you and they're supporting you, but you're the star of the show. so that all eyes should be on you and focusing on you. And by not looking at your slides, by focusing on the audience, you're making eye contact with them and you're getting that message across and you're convincing them of what you're trying to talk to them about. So practice your slides, know them inside and out, and then you don't have to kind of look over your shoulder and check where you were. Again, another disclaimer, I know this is ideal world. Sometimes we need to rush stuff, but this is for that really important presentation. The other reason for practicing, we just said that. The other reason for practicing is that you're going to know your content so well that if it's a presentation you're presenting again and again and again, you can kind of riff on the content, a bit like a jazz player. You might not be into jazz, I kind of am, so apologies, but you might know that jazz, sort of most jazz, isn't played the same way twice. There's the core tune, but depending on how the musician's feeling on the night, they'll kind of go off on a tangent and we'll play a little bit more of this, or they'll go off and play a little bit more of that. And the way that works in presentations is because you know your content so well, you're looking at the room, you're reading the room, and you can see what's landing with them. And so if something's really landing, you can focus on that a little bit longer. You can stick on that slide, you can embellish it, you can dig deeper into that content that you know so well. And then if something isn't really clicking with them so much, then you can move on from that because you know what's coming next and you can know to kind of read the room, move it on, and just make the best possible out of your presentation rather than sticking on each slide and spending the same amount on each slide every time. Because you know what's coming next, because you know the story of your deck, you can move it along and get that content to fit the audience a little bit better. Okay, so we have got everything out of our head. We have edited our deck to within an inch of its life. We've made it look great. We've made it think about the best way to get it over to the audience. And then we've practiced it so that we know it inside out and so that we can read the room and keep that eye contact and riff on our presentation should we need to change it. Now we're into the bit of the basics, the kind of the health and safety bit. Prepare your environment. So if you're going to present in person, get there beforehand. Go visit the site a couple of days earlier. Speak to the technician or the event producer and just see what all the constraints of the presentation are. Where are your slides going to be? What does the sound sound like? Is there a comfort monitor? If you're not sure what a comfort monitor is, it's usually like a big screen down by your feet that has your slides on. But we don't need it because we've practiced. But should you need it, it's there with your next slide coming up and maybe even your speaker notes. I was at the Albert Hall last week and Edith Bowman was presenting and she even had a script going at the back of the screen. So, you know, she didn't have time to practice it perfectly. But that's all good stuff to know. How's your microphone going to work? And does your clicker work? How's your clicker going to work? And you should always have a clicker. That's my top tip. Have a clicker. Because again, by having a clicker, you're not looking at your laptop and getting distracted about, is it the space bar or is it the return bar? Or, you know, how am I going to advance my slides? I've just hit the space bar. That's what I just did wrong there. So always have a clicker if possible. And then you know exactly what's coming on. Test your videos. How do they sound? How loud are they? All of these good things so that there's no surprises for you when you're getting ready to present. If you're presenting online, do a similar thing. Set up a blank call with nobody on and then check your connection. Check how your video looks. Test the sound. Think about how you're going to answer questions, like we've just said here. And I can see a question from Tim. That's a very good question, Tim. I'll come to that in just a second. And my final tip for online presentations like this one is turn off your self-view camera. You look gorgeous. Don't worry about it. Just turn off your camera and then you won't be distracted. If you can see yourself, you're going to worry about that I don't know, maybe you didn't shave properly this morning, or your makeup's not quite right, or there's a light glinting in your glasses. Don't care about it. Just go with your presentation, focus on it, don't have any distractions. So that's my top tips for preparing your environment. Tim's question is, how long would you spend on developing a 20-minute presentation? And unfortunately, Tim, it's a bit like how long is a piece of string? Um, Again, it depends on the importance of that. Um, if it's something that you're going to presenting again and again and again, I'd suggest you spend a long time on it, and practice it and go through all these steps. If you're just going to be presenting a shorter presentation, you can take a little bit less time, but for a 20-minute presentation, I wouldn't spend less than a couple of hours. I think if you don't remember anything else today, it's that first step of getting everything out of your head before you put it into slides. Because that's literally the first thing I see in a bad deck, is that that's all they've done is got it out of their head, dumped it in slides. If you do anything else, just do that and then put it into slides and think about the story. So that would be my answer to you, Tim. All right, last up, we're actually in this. It's our time to present. You've done everything you can prepare. I'm not going to go over the steps again because we've talked about them, and I've got to go over them again in a minute. But you've done, you've really scrutinized your deck. You've made it look as good as it possibly can be. We've thought about the media. We've practiced it. We've prepped our environment. There's nothing that, things still go wrong, but we've absolutely prepared ourselves in the best way possible. So when it comes to presentation, think about what you're going to wear. I always think dress to impress. I know when I used to work at Apple, a lot of people used to dress very smart to come to work, but I don't think that's necessarily important. Wear what makes you feel confident and comfortable. What makes you feel like the best version of you. It might be a t-shirt, it might be a three-piece suit, it might be your nicest dress, it might be flip-flops and shorts, whatever it is to make you feel comfortable and make you feel like the best version of you. It's something else to take out of the distractions and the worry. By dressing how you feel comfortable, it's something you don't want to, something less to worry about, and you can focus on your presentation. Breathe and pause. I'm quite conscious I've not had that many pauses in this presentation, but some of the best ones I've ever seen use pauses really, really effectively. Don't worry about blank airtime. Your audience are captivated by what you're saying. And by pausing, you give them time to take in the last thought. And breathing helps you slow down, helps you get rid of any nerves you've got, helps you control your performance and own the stage, whether that's online or in person. So do consider pausing. My kind of anecdote about this is that a guy I used to work with was not very good at presenting, bless him. He was always really nervous, even though it was kind of all people that he knew. And he went away and he spoke to somebody and got some training. And when he came back, he just had these massive pauses. And it was such a little tip. But everybody just sort of stopped and listened because it's kind of, he was controlling the room. He wasn't afraid of gaps and there being, like I say, this dead air time. So it's a really effective way of controlling your presentation. And then this is just sort of reiterating a point we made before. Keep that eye contact with your audience. They're here to see you. You're the person that's the star of the show. So you can shine and don't worry about the slides too much. You've done all you can to make them good. You've simplified them, and they're just to support the message that you're saying. So that's something to consider. Okay, we've come to the end, and I've got to tell you what I've told you now. So just a reminder, put it all down. Like I say, if you don't take anything else away from this presentation today, do this step. Get everything down somewhere else other than your slides first, and then just pick the best bits to put into your slides. When you pull your slides together, look at the structure. Use that zoom out technique. So whether it's light table in Keynote, whether it's slide sorter in PowerPoint, it's a little button down the bottom right with like 4 little squares, and when you click it, you'll see all your slides as like an overview. It's really helpful. Then polish your content once you've got your structure and your story really together. Bring in videos, bring in GIFs. This is where you could use your AI stuff. So one of the things I use AI for is, let's say there's an image I found that I really want to use, but it's only very low resolution. You can go into AI and not only make the resolution higher, but let's say it's square and I want it to be the same shape as my slide. You can have it fill the slide by using AI and using tools like that. You can also turn a still image into a moving video to add a bit of interest to it. So that's another good use of AI when you're polishing your content. Once you're really happy with your deck, once you're halfway through, then make sure you practice it. By practicing it, you can keep that contact with your audience. You know what's coming next. You can read the room. And then once you've practiced it and you're really happy with everything, don't forget to prepare your environment. Make sure there's going to be no distractions for you or your audience and that you're ready to go. And then finally, you're ready to present. And we shared a couple of tips on wearing something comfortable, breathing, pausing. And again, just the last tip, don't forget, you're the star of the show, not your slides. So it's your chance to shine, and your slides are just going to help you. You mentioned that AI isn't there yet. Sorry, there's another question just coming in from Maria. You mentioned that AI isn't there yet. What would be happening if it was there? I.e., what else does Canva PowerPoint do that AI does not currently? So the problem with the AI slides that I've seen at the moment is that you don't really have that kind of fine control over them. You can drop a bunch of words in and it will display them and it'll drop them into a nice template for you. But it doesn't sort of let you finally control how it's going to look at the end. Both Canva and PowerPoint that you've mentioned, they do have AI built in. So they can help you with image generation. They can help you with copy changes. But what I wouldn't recommend, I think where it will end up is that let's say you do that first step of putting it all down. You could put that all into Word, or you could dictate it to ChatGPT or something. And then you could say, make me a presentation from what I've just told you. That's where it'll end up, I think. And that'll be great. But right now, those results are really mixed. So I think if you're looking for a quick presentation that you're just sharing perhaps with your team and it's not absolutely critical, then maybe you could try getting ChatGPT to build your slides. Give it a go. But I think if what we're talking about is a really, really important presentation, I wouldn't leave that to an AI tool just yet. You don't have that control, and while it'll look nice, it won't kind of let you tweak it to the sort of nth degree. Ahmed's got another question. Skills for using colors in presentations. Could you expand upon that a bit more, Ahmed? Do you want to come on and chat about that? Ahmed, did you have any more? Can you suggest some AI tools for videos or photos to check?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, hi Ahmed.
Okay, I want to ask about the using for the colors. What's the best color for the official presentation and marketing presentation? Can you give us some idea about that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of schools of thought on colors. The first one is if you've got a really established brand, make your presentations match that brand. Your presentation shouldn't be a shock. It should be a continuation of that brand experience, so that if you put your website on the last slide, when they go to your website, It should have the same typefaces and colors and imagery and feel that your website and the rest of your branding does. So that's one thing to consider for presentation colors. And then the other thing that's really important is to make sure that the colors are accessible. So there are lots of tools you can use to make sure your colors are accessible. So things like contrast. So you shouldn't really have white text on a yellow background, for example. Everything needs to be of a fairly high contrast so that everyone in your audience can see it. And you could just Google tools for making accessible colors and accessible presentations. So that hopefully that helps. If you want to come up with a nice color palette, if you don't have an existing brand, there's a website called Coolors, Coolors, I believe. I think it's Coolors. And you can put in one color that you like, and it'll generate a 5-color palette from that. So it's a bit like the beginnings of branding. Usually brands have a kind of a 5-color palette. So that's a good place to start if you've got no idea of a set of coordinated color. But if you do have a brand, try and make it as close to that as possible. Amna has a question on, can you suggest some AI tools for videos or photos to generate? Yeah, they all do it, is the short answer. What I found really helpful is FreePic. So FREEPIK. They started life as a stock photo library type thing, and they still do that, but their AI tools have come on in leaps and bounds, and so they're a really good place to go to for creating that sort of thing. But there's really lots and lots of tools now that do videos and photos. There's a really helpful website called, I don't know if you remember back in the day, there was a website called There's an App for That that sort of detailed all the apps that there were when apps first came out. There's now a website called There's an AI for That. And so you go to that website, just Google it, There's an AI for That. Google it and put in videos or photos or whatever you want, and it'll recommend the current best tools for that. There's an AI for that. Sorry, Amna was asking the name of that tool. Just Google there's an AI for that. And it's a website that will recommend, it'll sort of give you an overview of all the AIs that there are, but if you're searching for a specific tool, that's a good place to go. Did you hear me now, Amna? Great stuff. But yeah, Google is still your friend, especially as Google's got its own AI increasingly built into results now. Um, it's a good tool. Okay, so just wanted to say thank you very much for today. If you have got any questions for me, you can find me at sixmileshigh.com, or you can email me at fly@sixmileshigh.com. Or I'm sure if you send questions to Zaina or Helen, they can send them on to me. And thanks very much for listening today.
Thank you so much. I'm presenting tomorrow and I've just got my clicker out of the drawer
Yes.
because it was still in the drawer and not in my bag. So that's the top tip
Check the
straight
batteries.
away. And I'm so going through my content and taking slides out as well. Thank you so much. Lots of appreciation in the chat as well. I think that was a really useful session for everybody, actually. Whether we're in innovation or not, like you say, you certainly were the star of our show today. So much appreciate you sharing, Mark. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Cheers.
Thanks
Thank
so
you,
much.
everyone. And
Thanks,
look forward
guys.
to seeing you in October. Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.